I stopped buying the birthday gifts my husband signs his name to. My husband Dan is one of those guys everyone calls thoughtful. His mom brags about it. His sister posts about it. Dan always remembers, they say. What none of them know is that for 11 years, I'm the one who remembered. I bought the gifts. I wrapped them. I wrote the cards. I signed them Love Dan and Sarah, and Dan signed his name on top of mine like he'd done anything at all. His mother's birthday, his dad's, both his sisters, the 7 nieces and nephews, his coworkers, his golf buddies. I kept a spreadsheet. I kept sizes and favorite colors and which kid was into dinosaurs that year. Dan's contribution was signing his name and handing it over. The thing that finally got me was his mom's 60th. I spent 2 months on it. I found the exact china pattern she'd lost pieces of in a move decades ago. I called antique dealers. I paid way too much. I drove 40 minutes to pick it up. At the party, she opened it and started crying. She held Dan's face in her hands and said, "You are the only one who listens to me." Dan smiled and said, "I know how much that set means to you, Ma." I was standing right there holding the cake. Later, his sister pulled me aside and said, "You're so lucky. My husband doesn't even know my birthday." I said, "Yeah, lucky." And I went home and I did not sleep. So I stopped quietly. I didn't announce it. His dad's birthday came up in October, and I just didn't buy anything. Didn't remind Dan either. The morning of, Dan was drinking coffee and I said, "Did you get your dad something?" He looked at me confused. "You handle that, not this year." He laughed like it was a joke. When he realized it wasn't, he said, "Sarah, come on, that's a 2-minute thing for you." I said, "Then it'll be a 2-minute thing for you." He forgot, obviously. His dad got nothing, no card, no call, because Dan didn't even know the date. When his dad said something offhand at Sunday dinner, "Guess I'm getting old, everybody forgets me now." Dan went pale and blamed a busy work week. Then Thanksgiving. His youngest niece turned 9 the week after, and there's always a gift. I didn't buy it. Dan realized the night before, at 9 p.m. and stood in the kitchen genuinely panicking. What did we get her last year? I got her a telescope. Okay, so what do we get this year? We don't get anything, Dan. You get something. I don't know what she likes. You're her uncle. He said, "This is petty. You're doing this to prove a point." I said, "I'm doing this because I stopped." He went to the party empty-handed and told everyone the gift was on back order. His sister gave him a look. He came home furious, said I embarrassed him, said everyone expects him to show up with something because that's who he is. I said, "That's who I am. You just sign it." He didn't have anything to say to that, so he slept on the couch. Here's the part he didn't know. Back in the summer, at a barbecue, I'd overheard his mother telling her friends the story of the china. How her son searched for months. How her son remembered a pattern from 30 years ago. Her friend said, "My son wouldn't even remember my name." Everyone laughed. Dan sat there letting it happen. He raised his beer. So when his birthday came, mine to plan, always the big one, I planned it. I told him I'd invited everyone to the house. His whole family. I made the food. I bought a cake. Everyone showed up. His mom hugged him and said, "My thoughtful boy." His sisters, the nieces and nephews, all of them. After the cake, I stood up and said I had a little speech. Dan grinned, expecting the usual. I said, "I want to thank Dan for 11 years of being the most thoughtful man in this family. The china, Ma, I found it. I called 9 antique dealers. The telescope, the dinosaur stuff, every card any of you have ever gotten signed Love Dan and Sarah. I bought it. I wrapped it. I wrote it. Dan signed his name. That's the whole job he did." The room went quiet. His mom said, "Sarah, that's not," and stopped, because she was already doing the math on the china. Dan said, "Why would you do this here?" I said, "Because you let them clap for you here." His sister, the one who called me lucky, put down her plate and said, "So none of it was him?" I said, "None of it was him." Then I got my purse and my keys off the counter. Dan followed me to the door saying my name, saying we could talk about this, saying I was making him look terrible in front of everyone. I said, "No, you've been doing that for 11 years. I just stopped signing for you." He hasn't figured out what to get anyone since.